pursuing growth, investing in infrastructure, building resilience, and yet buckling under the weight of debt. Debt that was manageable until interest rates spiked, until the hurricane hit, until a global shock struck. But new approaches are emerging. Together with partners, the Caribbean Development Bank is redefining how debt is structured, reducing costs, and linking debt relief directly to development outcomes. The CDB seminar on innovative debt solutions will examine bold financing tools that can redefine how the Caribbean escapes the debt trap. Getting this right is not optional. Be part of the solution.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here today at the last panel of the annual meeting, for one reason at least, because I'm luckier than my president, that in being the last panel, I will not have any challenge from any other panel following, so I can ask any question to my panelists. So first, this is a very big luck. Welcome to this very important, very, very insightful panel that elaborate on the innovative debt solutions, in particular the regional multi-guarantee debt for resilience swaps. It's important also to mention, I want to make this reference, yesterday afternoon at the President's chat, the President highlighted the importance of FDB to play as a system to find innovative solutions, to join forces and partner together to scale up their financing capacity, to leverage their rating for mobilizing more private capital for development. So today, our panel comes at the right time and focus on practical solutions to address those strategic objectives through multi-guarantee debt for resilience swap. Such instrument allows multiple NDBs to join forces, leveraging their AAA, AA ratings and providing guarantee to lender bondholders in the benefit of Caribbean countries. For example, we'll talk about Barbados, to refinance costly debt at significantly lower price and longer maturity, at the same time generating savings for new resilient projects. We shall remember that Caribbean region is living at critical moments, not only for resilience, but for, in particular, let's say, international challenges they have and the resilience and climate risk. At the same time, they are burdened by high debt and the fiscal space is limited. We have to reinvent in some way our region in that sense, and new solutions are necessary. The pressure is very high, so we have to really act fast. So I am here gladly assisted by a very, very prestigious panel today. And in this panel, we'll analyze the perspective of development finance institutions from the indigenous regional development bank, from the worldwide development bank perspective, from the newly regional present development bank, from the experience and perspective of a development bank that has done several other debt for resilient swap or debt for climate swaps, and the perspective from the government, from the perspective of the government for benefits and using of savings, and finally, but last but not least, the perspective of the rating agencies. So let me ask you to welcome with a round of applause our panelists that I ask to join me on the stage. Thank you. So, Before starting, I would like to introduce my panelists, starting from the Minister of Barbados, Honorable Ryan Strone, who has played a leading role in the design and implementation of the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program. And as economist, he has previously served at the Barbados Central Bank and has held the leadership position with the Barbados Economic Society and Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you, Minister, for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Very glad to be here.
Thank you. Let me also introduce Lilia Boronchuk from the World Bank, Director of the Caribbean countries, that brings more than 30 years of development experience across Europe, Central Asia, Africa. And prior to join World Bank, she has been the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, of the National Bank of Moldova. Thank you, Lilia. Following John Oriol Pratt, Principal Financial Specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank, who leads the Capital Market and Guarantees product line. With more than 20 years of experience in sovereign risk management and structured finance, he is also Executive Secretary of the Latin American and Caribbean Debt Group. Thank you, John. And then Gabriel Felpeto is the Vice President and CFO of CAF, where he oversees the institution financial solvency, funding strategy, and asset liability management. With more than 30 years of experience in capital market and finance, he managed key relationships with international investors and credit rating agencies. Thank you, Gabriel, for joining us today. And on the right-hand side, we have Joshua Grundleger, Director of Fitch Rating Sovereign Americas Group, cover Caribbean, Canada, and United States. And he previously worked at the Moody's and the Economic Intelligence Unit, specializing in sovereign credit analysis and economic research. Thank you, Joshua, for joining us. And last but not least, my dear colleague, Jason Cotton, lead economist at the Caribbean Development Bank, that leads economic analysis, country engagement strategies, and policy-based lending operations across the Caribbean. He also worked on vulnerability and resilience issues affecting small island development states. Thank you, Jason. Let us begin by setting the stage for today's discussion, starting with Jason. Just one second. Yes. So, Jason, I would like to ask you, from the perspective of CDB, how does CDB see instruments like the Debt for Resilience swap? And how this instrument fit the broader strategy to scale up developing financing, particularly in the context, of capital constraint and maintaining our strong credit rating?
Thank you, Stefano. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin by setting CDB's strategy in context. The Caribbean Development Bank, we have an ambitious agenda to scale up development financing over the next 10 years. And that is predicated based on the large investment financing need that we see in the region. I mean, we've estimated this need at approximately 65 billion, and it could be even larger, taking into consideration some climate events. But I think the challenge that we see is that the current financing instruments, either that finance is either too small or it occurs relatively slowly. So what is needed is there is an urgent need for us to shift from short-term responses to more long-term resilience and transformation. So for me, the conversation today is about mobilizing finance, but it's also equally about how do we reduce poverty, how do we improve development outcomes, and how do we ensure that we build resilience in the Caribbean region. And I said that as a context to speak about the bank's, the CDB's 10-year strategic plan for the period 2026 to 2035, and we have entitled that plan Transforming the Caribbean for Resilience. And in that plan, we articulate the CDB's rebirth vision. And this rebirth vision is a vision of a new and a renewed and a forward-looking institution that positions ourselves, the organization, within three pillars: innovation, transformation, and thriving. And as part of that renewed vision, what we have articulated is the need to scale up development finance significantly in order for us to achieve that. And as a result, we have complemented that with the rollout of several new and innovative financing instruments. So the multi-guarantee debt swap that Stefano spoke about fits neatly within the bank's innovation agenda over the next few years. So in summary, Stefano, I want to just wrap up what I'm saying by, we see this debt swap transactions as a capital efficient, risk sharing, and a catalytic financial tool that helps to achieve three objectives. It helps to scale up financing, it helps to manage capital constraints, and that's very important for a small bank, and it helps to preserve credit strength. Thank you.
Very good. That's, you are summarizing in few words exactly the core playing role of this new instrument. And definitely the benefits are several, but there are also constraints that we take into account. I would like to move to Lilia, and I would like to ask Lilia the perspective of World Bank, how World Bank see partnership with other MDBs in deploying innovative instruments in the Caribbean, of course, and how those to scale up impacts in mobilizing additional financing for the region through this type of partnership.
So the short oh, I need the mic. Sorry. Yeah, I forgot I have a mic. I hope it works. Yeah. So the short answer is, I view it very positive. For some of the reasons that were just outlined. We've been talking about partnerships and partnering together and working together around the world for decades. We had various agreements that we signed in different parts of the world, and it's difficult to work together because we've been trying, but we need a push. And I must say that from all other regions that I worked in the Caribbean, I see us working more together. And this is because the region demands it, but this is also because we're getting pushed. Like in the case of Barbados, we did get a push to work
we
together.
We have one of the main actors on that.
And we will hear, it's actually bringing very good results. But I must say that this push is needed not only for us development institutions globally. I'll give an example internal from the World Bank. You know, we are a World Bank group. We have different institutions. We have the World Bank, we have MIGA, we have IFC, and so on. So the World Bank has been happily doing policy-based guarantees. These are guarantees that help countries go to the market and get lower rates on the capital market, and of course, for us to be able to provide a guarantee, there are some policy changes, policy reforms that they need to do. And MIGA was doing happily its guarantees, political guarantees, and then our new president, he's not that new now, but said, why are you not working together? And we were thinking, how can we work together? We do different products. And then he said, we're creating a guarantee platform. We are putting MIGA into MIGA everything that everybody was doing before on guarantees, including IBRD, MIGA, IFC, and so on. And you know, recently we did a so-called Policy-Based Guarantee Plus, PBG Plus, in Panama. And there are a few of them in some other countries as well, where IBRD provided the policy-based guarantee for the government to go and access the markets and for an operation of for a transaction of 1.4 billion. And MIGA provided an additional guarantee. So this additional guarantee covered 95% of the risk for the country, which allowed the country to place this 1.4 billion financing, and it lowered the cost to the country by 90 to 90 basis points. So created significant savings, 110 million in net present value, which now the country can use for its developmental needs. So working together, we can achieve a lot. And I'll stop here.
Thank you.
We do it positively, and we would like to work together with the others.
Yeah, and MIGA is also joining forces in this multi-guarantee,
Exactly.
for resilience swap of our four. So here we have really an example of, I want to talk about this later, about standardization and interoperability, because I think Joan can elaborate on this later. But now I want to ask you, Joan, thank you, Lilia. I want to ask Joan about the lesson learned from IDB. IDB has implemented several debt for resilience swap, not only with Barbados, but also specifically Barbados in the last years. And so lesson learned, what you can say to us on lesson learned, and how this lesson learned can be implemented in the present and future transaction.
No, thank you very much, and thank you, Stefano, for the invitation, and to the Caribbean Development Bank. It's a pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, the IDB pioneered the debt swaps, the market debt swaps. We have already done 5 debt swaps in Latin America and the Caribbean, generating more than 2 billion in the fiscal space for several sectors. The first one we did in Barbados, and we learned quite a few lessons learned. First one is the importance of leadership, political leadership. Well, we have here one of the masterminds, I would say, of how political leadership, view, and guidance, it's crucial to unlock bottlenecks, convene different partners, and push us all together in the right direction. And the President Motley and also Minister Strong were so instrumental in doing so, as it should be, because at the end of the day, these are instruments in the benefit of countries, and they should respond to the country will. So it's super important for us. Second is the importance of combining policy reforms and the financial benefit of the instruments as guarantees. So it's not only the benefit that a guarantee brings in terms of creating financial space, but it's also crucial that a country that created the financial space and has resources to direct to certain sectors also has the policies and governance in place that are adequate to use those resources. So those resources that are going to be for building a new water treatment plant or a power utility, they need to fit within a policy framework that is conducive to good policy outcomes. And that is very, very important. And that's another thing that MDBs we can bring to the table, because we can combine policy work, advice, and financial instruments.
Absolutely.
And on the third part, I think technical cooperation is also very important. These are complex transactions. These entail a lot of work in terms of project management, supervision, and monitoring, and providing technical cooperation from the financial part and the sectorial part as well. It is very, very important so countries don't feel alone and abandoned there after the operation, but we keep helping and we stay present through the life of the transaction, and we create a state capacity once we do a transaction as a debt swap.
Perfect. And you have given definitely a very, very comprehensive picture of what are really key factors, a key lesson learned. And we'll hear from Mr. Strone more on that part of the benefit side. I want to, before moving to Mr. Strone, I want to first complete the round of the multilateral. And CAF is the first time that CAF has done other debt swap in Latin America, but not in the Caribbean. So this is the first time that CAF is joining forces in the Caribbean for a debt for resilience swap. So how you can say to us about what is, from CAF perspective, operational, strategic perspective, priorities, and how do you see eventually, from CAF perspective, challenges for this type of, but also for the future operations?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Stefano, for the invitation. Thank you for the Caribbean Development Bank for inviting us to this very interesting event and for joining this panel as well. We see this transaction as very strategic because, as you mentioned, it's our first in the region. And we see this in the context of our increasing presence in the Caribbean region. Despite that, we have for many years worked with some Caribbean countries, but with very few of them. But in the last few years, our shareholders decided to increase the presence in the region. So far, we have 5 countries, and actually 6 countries. Just one joined a few months ago. And there are in line about 5 more countries that will join we hope, in the very near future. So for us, this is not only one transaction, but this is a very important one. So we want to be sure that this is a good one. I'm sure because of the partners we have that this will be the result, of course. Having said that, we also see this as a very strategic, since these positions CAF, not only CAF, but in general multilaterals, as catalysts for innovative debt solutions that both address fiscal constraints, but also climate vulnerability in the region, which is certainly crucial for these countries. It also aligns with a broader shift from financing after disasters to financing resilience upfront, which is also something very important. It also demonstrates that we as a system can operate and move beyond what is considered traditional lending into structured, capital efficient solutions, because this transaction combines guarantees, market access, and policy alignment. So it has several very positive things. We also see this as a benefit, of course, for the country, because, as I mentioned before, this releases some fiscal space. And this should have also an impact, not only, our presence in the transaction, on the rating or on the transaction itself, but it should have also an impact on the credit quality of the country, which at the end benefits as well as our credit position. You know this very well, Stefano. And indeed, I would like to understand what is the view of rating agencies, not only in the sense of the specific transaction, but for the country as a whole. What would be the impact of doing this kind of transactions? So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Well, not by chance we have here a rating agency that we expect give us some light on that. But before going to that side, I would like to thank you again, Gabriel. I would like to now give the floor to the perspective of who is benefiting this type of transaction. I really would like to hear from Minister Strone in terms of debt reduction benefits, from Barbados' perspective. What type of benefits, how you see this benefit, and also especially because this transaction free up space for new savings for new resilient projects. So how do you see the saving, especially with respect of this transaction that we are structuring, would be used? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefano. First of all, let me congratulate the bank for successfully hosting these meetings
Thank
in
you.
Bahamas. Let me also extend gratitude to the government and people of Bahamas for their wonderful hospitality. Now, it would be remiss of me not to point out that what you are seeing here this afternoon is part of what we have been advocating for under the Bridgetown Initiative.
Yes.
And so and an important point too is 8 years ago when we started to address these debt matters, we had been graduated from the World Bank. And through that advocacy in relation to how we should move away from GDP per capita as the measure and focus more on vulnerability, through that advocacy, and I see my colleague, Minister here from the Bahamas, we were successful in that advocacy such that middle-income countries like Barbados and Bahamas now have access to IBRD again in relation to the recognition of that vulnerability. So it is important to appreciate that you must work together to ensure that you advocate for the needs of the people in the region. Now, we've done a few swaps already with the IDB, so this will be our third in 5 years. And we have painstakingly gone about this process to demonstrate that, one, we have asked MDBs to work together, and therefore we felt it was important that as we were focusing on how do we scale, that we go through this exercise whereby, whilst each of you could have done it on your own individually, we felt it was important to demonstrate to the region and to the world that from an advocacy and policy collaboration perspective, that 4 MDBs can come together, pull all of the expertise into the room with the government to be able to achieve scale and to be able to unlock significant resources that will help us deploy and create fiscal space, one, to deploy with respect to addressing a number of health-related matters in the country. And I think this is important because as we have been, I'm absolutely confident that we can financially engineer any solution amongst us. But what we are trying to make sure that we underscore within the context of our population is that the behavioral change with respect to how NCDs evolve in the region is going to be important because the cost of the provision of healthcare has gotten significantly very high, and therefore we need to tackle that. So there's some infrastructure projects that we're going to be putting in place, but a lot of the emphasis is really going to be around how do we further amplify our new school nutrition policy, because we've seen that 40% of our children are now considered obese, which is very high for a small island, and therefore we need to arrest that. Otherwise, the additional cost down the road, productivity, and becomes much more expensive, and therefore that requires us now to work together with the population, not just from a fiscal perspective, but really it is genuinely a developmental and long-term issue that we need to address. So this allows us to free up some resources in addition to what we're already doing on budget to be very targeted and focused in relation to some of the behavioral change matters that we need to address, because if we don't arrest the NCD issue in relation to where we're going, then the long-term growth trajectory of the country is not going to be there. And so whilst we are focused on building resilience and climate and all these other things which are absolutely critical, if you don't have a healthy enough population to actually deliver the reforms, then you're going to have some challenges. So we felt that this could serve as a template for how not just MDBs can work together, but government can be able to be innovative with respect to how it can respond to some very significant challenges that really need scale. Because at 40% childhood obesity, you really need a serious intervention to be able to reduce that, if not eliminate it, within a 5 to 10 year period. And to the extent that we get the benefits with respect to perception of creditworthiness and what we are doing with respect to our long-term debt profile is important. Let me state here that when we started, we were at 178% of GDP, debt to GDP. We are now at 93. And so these swaps really do allow us to provide financial resources to focus on areas that we are currently constrained to do, which are still important, because if we want to meet our developmental goals, we need to create as much fiscal space to be able to still meet the debt targets, and we are on track for the 6% by 2035. We've got a number of credit upgrades that we've done, a number of liability management operations in the meantime. But this is really transformational because MDBs working together collaboratively, all in one space, and I must say it was a joy to chair the meeting a few weeks ago in Bridgetown, where we had all 4 banks in the same room, focus on how do we create opportunities for ordinary Barbadians. And I think that effort must be commended, because it is the first time I can think of that in such a small place too, that you've had 4 major banks working together to be able to achieve this objective. So I hope that when the transaction is completed, that my friend here will see the benefit. But seriously, it is phenomenal. And as we try to get our young population to understand that in order for us to deliver better public services, we've got to be creative. We've got to introduce the technologies. We have to be able to change the way that people interact with the health system and have more proactive health-seeking practices within families and communities. And therefore, we're modernizing. That's why even with the technical assistance and the solutions that have been implemented in other parts of the world, I think that becomes part of the conversation for how each individual institution working together can help support a very small state respond to what is really a very acute level of not just obesity, but the chronic levels of NCDs could be a significant disincentive to growth, if you like, going forward. So we want to solve that, and I want to thank each of you for helping us to be able to craft a solution that allows us to be able to deliver for the people.
Thank you, Mr. Stropp, because I think what you acknowledge is really is challenging from one hand, but the other hand is very, very, strategic and impactful. So that is absolutely what all together we want to make sure that will happen. And we'll talk about scaling up in a few minutes. I want to go now to the Prospective Rating Agency, because we are all interested in knowing how this instrument really improve, or in what way this instrument can improve the credit profile of the country that is benefiting from this instrument. If you can elaborate on this, and also I would like to ask also how to maximize the risk mitigation benefits.
Yeah, thank you, Stefano. So I think the first thing probably worth saying is that sort of for a country to have diversity of options and financing options is generally a credit strength. The more tools that are out there, it means that there's, different institutions, different entities that are willing to support the country, right? And so I think that alone, is generally something that we look positively on. In general, relationships between countries and different multilaterals is something that we keep an eye on to the extent that they have the support, either in technical sense or in a financial sense. So that's sort of, regardless of the structure, if you will, it's often something that the credit rating agencies do take into consideration. In terms of the more specific structures of, say, these debt swaps, there's sort of two main areas I think that it really would impact, and it's generally through the fiscal metrics that we look at. One is sort of the debt profile, so to the extent that it can change that debt profile, smooth things out, is in terms of liability management, is often a positive, right? When there's a big repayment that comes up on a bond, that can be a risk, particularly for countries that are small and have limited resources. So to the extent that that is addressed through these sort of arrangements, that's always a positive. And then, of course, helping to reduce debt. So any savings that are result from such a transaction, Minister Strawn talked about lowering debt to GDP ratios. One of our key metrics in our criteria, and so it's very important when that comes down, giving more fiscal space for the countries. These transactions, I think, can have some role in that. I think there's other actions alongside that also support that sort of fiscal progress. Lastly, is the interest side, right? I mean, the big reason for doing this is interest savings. So to the extent that interest savings come through, that provides fiscal space for other priorities or for further reduction in improvement in deficits or moving into surplus, right? And so again, these are key metrics that we consider when evaluating a sovereign's credit profile. So it depends on the scale, depends on the scope, but I think these can often be sort of fit into the broader toolkit of tools that sovereigns use to improve their balance sheets, improve their fiscal performance, and then obviously strengthen relationships with key partners.
But I have to ask you, because now you are talking about improving credit profile, reducing the cost of interest. All this is achieved with this multi-guarantee swap. So would we expect that Barbados would be upgraded?
I'm going to punt on that one, but I mean.
I can ask a challenging question.
He paid you on the side for this, right? That's the question. Look, strengthening credit profiles is always a plus, right? I mean, we look at a huge array of factors when we, consider, a country's credit rating. So many things factor in, but at least on the surface, and the devil is always in the details with these sort of, products and the structures and how they, play out. It generally seems that, like I said, lowering debt, lowering interest burden, that's credit positive, right? And it certainly improves the credit profile. Whether it changes the rating or not, I mean, that's a question for our committees. But
thank you. Okay, but we will come back on this. I want to move now. Thank you very much for this, and I want to stress from the audience side. You can see the level, the profile, the level of conversation we are having here today. I want to move to the characteristic, the important element of regional, because this, what we are discussing here, it's a pilot, in fact, and Mr. Strawn was already mentioning this. So the scaling up impact of having, Minister Strawn was exactly saying this, scaling up in the potential of having more multilateral together, because one multilateral, two multilateral make an impact. Four multilateral can really make an impact at regional level. So I would like to do a second round where I will focus more on this second area of importance of the multi-guarantee swap. So, Jason, CDB is the only indigenous regional multilateral. So how do you see CDB replicating this pilot scheme in rolling out this in the wider Caribbean?
Yeah, thank you, Stefano. And I agree with you. I think that CDB is uniquely positioned as the region's only indigenous multilateral development bank to function in two roles: as a trusted intermediary and also as a platform builder in scaling up these transactions. And I think that our replication to scale would depend on, firstly, we would need to move from bespoke kind of innovations, which we have seen in some of the previous debt swaps in the region, towards more a system-wide financing platform. But the question really is, how do we do that? And I want to suggest a few things. I think, firstly, there needs to be standardization. I think there needs to be, to have scale, we need to create templates that are repeatable across transactions. I think that would help to lower transaction costs. It would help to accelerate execution, and it will help to boost familiarity with these transactions. Beyond that, I think that we would definitely need partnerships, as we're seeing on this stage. I think that the partnerships are important, firstly, as the Minister said, among MDBs, pooling our balance sheets. I think that is where the partnerships begin. But I think we need to go even beyond that, and we need to look to see how we can expand the partnerships to the private sector and see how we can involve them in these transactions. So involve the private insurers, involve the pension funds, the bilateral partners, the climate funds, the philanthropic organizations. I think that is the next stage in the partnerships. But for that to occur, we would need to target de-risking these instruments through not only well-designed guarantees, but also first loss, second loss structures, and as well local currency transactions. You know, these are some of the things that we need to put in place. And I think that CDB is uniquely positioned there because of our reach across the region. We have 19 borrowing member countries. So I think that we would be an important partner in this scale. Beyond that, my colleague from the IDB, Joan, he spoke about the policy and institutional support. And I think it's important to know that these debt swaps are not just financial transactions. They have other components, and they would need to as well strengthen governance frameworks. And so the debt management capacity in some of our borrowing member countries may also need to be strengthened. We may also need to strengthen our procurement systems. We may also need to strengthen policies. So I think that's an important dimension. And the last one is I think we need to aggregate across countries because for some of our smaller borrowing member countries, for them to get involved, I think transaction at scale would be an important factor. And so we need to think about how we can bundle multiple sovereign transactions into a single program. So I think that is important. So in summary, what I'm saying is I think in order to replicate and scale this debt for development swap model, we need the standardization of partnerships. We need standardization of templates. Yes. We need partnerships with MDBs and the private sector. We need policy and institutional support. And we also need aggregation across countries, and included in that, of course, will be to develop a pipeline of investable projects.
Perfect. You have summarized exactly what is in our mind now that we are structuring this transaction, and we need to definitely work on it all together. Thank you. I think interoperability is also another important factor, I would add, because each MDB has a different characteristic, different features. We need to make sure that these are, in some way followed at the same time ensuring standardization. So it's a challenge on that side, but I think we can get there. So thank you again, and I want to move to Lilia for listening about lesson learned, specifically focused on replicability and scalability in Small Island, the experience of World Bank.
Thank you. It's an interesting question because, frankly, when we started doing this type of operations, just helping countries go and borrow on the capital markets at a low rate with a World Bank guarantee, we started very cautiously. And we've been doing that now for quite some time, but not many of operations of this have been done because it's actually not easy to do them. We've accelerated recently, and of course, you learn from each operation. And as much as we would like to standardize them, we try to standardize. The circumstances are different in different countries. And when we look at different operations, each of them has something specific. Like we did the debt for development swap in Cote d'Ivoire. We helped the country to borrow on the capital markets, and the development part was investing in education. So there was an education program that was ongoing where the government committed to use the savings for education. When we started working with the IDB and others on Barbados, we realized that actually the transaction is not necessarily going to the international capital markets, but helping the country borrow on local markets. And this is very different. So frankly, our team is still thinking through how do we price the risk, because we haven't done it before. MIGA is trying, so we're learning. With each of these operations, we are actually learning. And then this knowledge we're applying to other countries. And to take it further, we are actively discussing with the Eastern Caribbean countries how do we help them with their debt burden and help them reduce debt through something similar. Not many of them have access to the capital markets. So we're thinking through what would be the mechanism that would give the countries the best outcome, the best result. So the focus is on the best result, and of course on the instruments that can work in those circumstances. With some operations may not have a developmental, an explicit developmental component, like the one that I mentioned in Côte d'Ivoire, or the one that we are working in Barbados, where we have an explicit commitment from the government to invest in health. In some cases, like the one that I mentioned in Panama earlier, it's an implicit assumption that, of course, the government, it gets savings, it will lower its debt, it will have more resources to be able to invest in the country's development. So we're learning, and I think we will keep learning, and I think the world will learn from what we're doing in the Caribbean. I think I mentioned it before, and not only in this area, but in many other areas, the Caribbean have produced a lot of innovations that the world has now embraced and is implementing. Like CREEF is something that was born in the Caribbean, and many other innovations. So I hope we'll, partnering together, working together, we'll keep innovating and provide the lessons for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. This is very insightful, and I think this is it's a reality, but also an additional ambitious target objective for our future transaction, our future cooperation and partnership. Thank you. I would move to John for asking you about how can we enhance scalability and development impact in the future, looking at what you have done at IDB.
Thank you, and I share the view of my co-panelists that collaboration is key. And in the issue of sovereign debt, more than any other, I think MDBs are complements and not substitutes. So when you go and you try to finance a road, you can finance it, each one of us, But in the issue of debt, unfortunately, debt is too big, And to tackle that, we need to go together, and we are stronger together, And here we need to do it efficiently. We need to strengthen our synergies, and we have synergies in terms of knowledge. We have synergies in terms of the countries that we can deal with, and we have synergies in the type of instruments and ratings that we have. So to use this intelligently, it is crucial for us to scale up this in an efficient way in the next years. The initiative that we launched together with CAF and CDB is the first step to work together to standardize a way to act in debt swaps. Standardization is crucial at 3 levels. First, in doing term sheets together and approaching the market as a common entity, so reducing transaction costs in that end. Second, it's identifying a contract structure that is common to us in our guarantees, counter guarantees. That is very important to reduce transaction costs. And finally, on monitoring and supervision systems. We have a lot to win in sharing those as well, so transactions become easier to put together. Also, I think it's very important to share pipelines, to identify together opportunities, and to go together to countries to explain our value proposition. And that is what we do with the multi-guarantor initiative for the Caribbean. I strongly support as well the knowledge peer-to-peer exchange. I think we've learned a lot doing swaps in the last few years, and we are glad to share the knowledge we have. We also may receive knowledge from other partners, as the World Bank or CAF, and we've been doing that with other MDBs. For example, I just came from Buenos Aires, where we had a workshop with Fomplata explaining how to do debt swap for education. And it's interesting, because it is a way where you, as a bank, help another MDB to put together a type of transaction and develop a product as the sovereign guarantee. And I think we can do a lot of that among us. And finally, to scale up, we should change also internally. At the IDB, to work with guarantees, it requires to break some silos. We are used to work on the financial world and then on the sectorial world, being education, infrastructure. When you do guarantees, this requires a coordination effort, and our institutions sometimes are not ready to deploy this type of cross-sectional work, and we need to change a bit the mindset and culture to do this type of things.
Yeah, thank you. This is, I think you touch a very, very, very critical point, that is critical factor, that is the cross-functionality, cross-coordination. So standardization is important, but if you don't have cross-functionality, you're going to have a lot of silos, issues, and so inefficiency. Thank you again, Joan. So because we talk about several here, lesson learned, an important point. Let's look at the challenges and the benefits for the MDB. I want to ask Gabriel, from the perspective of CAF, how the multilateral can benefit from these multi-guarantees. I will focus more on that now. Thank you.
Sure. No, thank you, Stefano. I mean, by nature, this type of instrument, the multi-guarantee instrument, is complex, of course, for several reasons. Of course, structuring these transactions, we have to align the national debt strategies with our own mandates, and this, of course, complexity increases as there are several MDBs working on the transaction. Despite that, it is clear in this panel that all of us are willing to coordinate and work together, but certainly, particularly the first one, which is the pilot we're having with Barbados, presents some challenges because we have to coordinate all of us, and all of us, we have different processes and risk frameworks, so we have to align those, and hopefully we should reach that soon. That's our hope. And certainly also, in general, this transaction, we have to ensure credible or the credibility of the investments that are going to be done with the savings proceeds from this transaction, with robust monitoring and robust KPIs as well. But certainly all of these challenges are clearly outweighed with the benefits, which goes to your question. This multi-guarantee approach, the idea is to lower financing costs for the country and improves market access by crowding in investors, to the country. It also enables larger and hopefully faster transactions when we have common ground for future transactions. Thanks to sharing risk among all of the NDBs. But also very importantly for the country is that it creates fiscal space without increasing debt. That's the whole idea of the instrument, while redirecting resources towards resilience investments and regional public goods.
Thank you. Definitely, I think what you highlighted are several benefits, and this demonstrates that it's not one-sided, it's two-sided. There are benefits for the country, but also benefits for the multilateral that work on this. We have mentioned this before briefly, but I want to ask Mr. Strone, what policy reforms or commitments are tied to the use of savings generated?
So, as I indicated earlier, the focus really is on the health infrastructure, as well as the behavioral change in relation to how people eat, what we do with the school nutrition policy, is the key in relation to the reforms that we will focus on with the proceeds from this. Now, when we started this, the initial size was $500 million US dollars. And during the course of our discussions, we recognized that we could extract a few more savings if we scaled up a little bit to $600 million US dollars. So the I'm seeing some of my bankers here. The RFP went out last Friday, so they're all sharpening their pencils now to make sure that they come back. But the truth is that 1.2 billion, 2 billion Barbados dollars transaction. There's something for everybody in there, and therefore we are trying to mobilize as much across the financial sector to help them obviously realize that what we need to focus on in relation to the policy changes here really matter to the long-term sustainability of the country. So the part of one of the responses, there will be a National Rehabilitation Center. We've been having some issues with drug addiction and some of those things that have impacted productivity in the workplace, so that will help us to be able to address some of those issues there. We're also addressing some accommodation with respect to our seniors in our geriatric hospital network, because we are aging population, and therefore having greater accommodation for seniors in the golden years is going to be important. So we've completed phase 1. Some of the resources here will go to phase 2 of that specific project. As I said, we are going to be tackling childhood obesity in a major way, and therefore working with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Education in terms of introducing children to more healthier options, supporting the school nutrition policy, having more agriculture programs in the schools so that the school meals framework is better resourced and linked, is really part of how we see the long-term trajectory of the change in behavior. Also going to be introducing some telemedicine, which I think is going to be interesting, because it is not just the patients, but the system itself and how it interacts with people and exchange data and information is going to be a key part of the entire reform, which will be something that's supporting what the swap is intended to do. So there's a significant amount of work to be done in the next, say, 3 to 5 years that is going to be particularly important for changing the trajectory with respect to where we are with respect to the prevalence of NCDs in the country. And so if we're going to have a real opportunity in 15 to 20 years of sustained growth, then we need to make sure that on the health side, that one, the population is healthier, the cost of provisioning for the diabetes and hypertension and these things should start to moderate, because at the rate that we've been seeing over the last few years, it will become pretty unsustainable if we don't have a significant attempt to be able to change the course of people's behavior. And so we accept that it is a challenge, in the same way that you guys have accepted that it's a challenge working together. And therefore, I think if we can, and given that, and I say this in the context that it is a regional initiative, and part of it we will also be addressing some infrastructural needs as it relates to CARPHA, our Caribbean Public Health Agency. So we're going to do some work there to help strengthen them. So in the context of countries determining what they do, obviously each country will choose whichever area of priority is theirs, and which regional institution they may choose to support. And therefore, we believe that this really is a working template for we can pull off the shelf. And I think, as Lilia indicated, just with a few adjustments, and allow countries then to be able to address some very, very, very important matters that you currently don't have the resources to be able to do in a sustained way. So I think the net result of all of this is that we are very optimistic that once we can get these additional programs going with what we have already programmed in the health system, then you can start to see a significant reduction in relation to waiting times in terms of how the system works, better health seeking practices, I think, across the community, but that's going to be a sustained effort over time, which we're committed to doing, because at the end of the day, resilience only makes sense if you have people alive to actually enjoy
Yes,
the resilience.
indeed. Thank you, Mr. Strong. And yes, what you are highlighting show the importance of this type of example of Barbados for the expansion to other countries in the region. So this is what we want to launch here. It's also the message that this transaction is just the first that can pile up a series of transactions for other countries in the region. So this is really, really key message that we want to transfer to the audience today. Before opening to the Q&A, I want to close with Joshua for listening a bit more about how could we use guarantees. If we use too much guarantee, this could be a concern for the credit risk profile and for transparency perspective.
You give me the fun ones. I guess as the rating agency, we have to have some.
I left you at the last exactly for this reason.
The wet blanket at the end, right? Yeah. So the first thing that, as a rating agency, we always evaluate with one of these debt swaps is honestly whether it qualifies as a distressed debt exchange, which is a form of default. And our criteria sort of looks at two main points with that. One is there material change in terms for the original bondholders, those that are swapping out their debt. If there's a material change and they're going to be losing substantial principal, for instance, that can be a concern, right? Because sovereign has power to potentially push it upon them, right? So we look for that, and that's the first question. And then the second component of that is, has this transaction been done to avoid what otherwise may have been sort of a more traditional default, right? So a country that's in severe distress does a debt swap, right before an interest payment is due in order to avoid that interest payment. So those two together, I think, help us determine whether we think it's a distressed debt exchange or not. If it's not, then sort of the comment that I made before of all the potential benefits sort of start to come into play. Two other areas of, I think, potential concern, although I think they're more nuanced and complicated than being declared a potential default, is market access. So I don't think using such transactions is in that sense a bad thing, right? But one of the things that we look for in our credit analysis is general market access, strong domestic markets, access to external financing, in the private sector. The more robust the market access, and this goes to sort of the first point I was making, having a lot of tools in your toolkit, the more that you have that, it's generally a strength for a country. So that's not to say that using a tool like this is bad, but if it's the only tool being used, it raises a question of why, right? And there could be answers for that. And I think it does potentially cut both ways, right? Certain countries that don't have market access may start to get market access by using, a tool like this, right? But I think that broader conversation around market access and the why it's not there, if you saw an entire sort of multilateral guaranteed, where are the banks? Why are they not, or other market participants? And then lastly is and this is maybe the hardest question for us or anybody to answer, but it's sort of use of proceeds. What's the project going for, right? We generally tend to be agnostic. We look at top level, fiscal balances, and we don't want to opine on, policy decisions. But to the extent that a particular transaction is, say, a new transaction, a new project that may have otherwise not been done, versus doing something that, say, was number one priority and would have been financed, from something else, that becomes sort of a meaningful question insofar as it potentially affects all the debt metrics, right? So you could see a situation where this project is getting financed through, some sort of guarantee, and the government may not have done that project, but they still continue to do everything else. Their debt might actually then go up as a result, right? Again, I think it's hard for us to know this, in practice, but these sort of dynamics will ultimately play out in the numbers that we see. And so I think, making sure that, the policy priorities are being set in a way that's, fundamental both to the fiscal picture that the government wants to achieve, and then also, the economic returns that come, from some of these, projects.
But definitely, this it's one of the elements that we have talked about in terms of how the multilaterals can, in this sense, ensure this type of transparency, this type of commitment, and so that the government is performing at the same time multilateral are a sort of, you have a mitigant there in some way. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly playing a role. I guess, it may be a question that I would throw back to how are the projects chosen, right? Is it what's the economic analysis being done? What's the potential for, say, you're building resilience in anticipation of, a hurricane, for instance? How are those projects being selected? Is it political process in the country, or is it something that's coming through, the multilateral? Again, there's not necessarily a right path or process, but there's probably projects that are going to either have, greater fiscal or economic benefits that would then, again, show up in the numbers that we look at on a regular basis.
Okay, that's a good tip for us for our next work that we expect us in the next months. Thank you. Before I would like to open before closing. I would like to open the floor to Q&A. But before opening to Q&A in general, I would like to ask, at CDB we care about youth, so we would like to ask if is anybody from the young future leaders that would like to ask questions. Is there anybody? I see someone. Okay, very good. Please say your name and your organization or your work or role.
Good afternoon. I am Rianka Chance, and I'm the Future Leader Network member for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So my question is, as young people, it is quite natural that we will inherit both the economic and climate-related challenges facing the Caribbean region. How can debt for resilience swaps ensure that the fiscal space created today translates into a tangible long-term benefit for future generations, particularly in areas like sustainable job creations, health, and, of course, climate resilience?
Thank you. I think you want to answer, Jason?
Sure.
Thank you.
So, thank you for the question. It's good to see the Future Leaders Network so involved. I think that, the key of the discussion here is that for these debt swaps to achieve the promise, the savings from them really need to be directed effectively to the intended areas that we said or promised that they would go. And that, to me, requires that we ensure that the debt swaps and these transactions more broadly have several things. One, we need to ring-fence the fiscal savings, right? We need to ensure that there are mechanisms to ensure that they are targeted towards the specific intervention areas, investments that have been identified. We need to have strong governance and independence oversight of these transactions. We need to ensure that the debt for development swaps are tied to the medium and long-term development strategies of the country, which goes back to something that Joshua was saying. We need to ensure that it is aligned to the direction and the policy priorities of the country, and we need to have institutional capacity building. So if we have these mechanisms, I think that the gains from these debt swaps could be locked in. It can contribute to both the medium-term development objectives and the kind of sustainable growth that we are targeting, that Minister Strawn is speaking about, that they want to see in the government of Barbados and many other countries. And I think that then would redound to all members of society, including young ladies like yourself, to ensure that you all don't leave the Caribbean in the future, but we have sustainable jobs that give you not only a livable wage, but a wage that enables you to thrive and prosper right here in the Caribbean region.
Thank you. I think I will add, not only retain you, but attract the others back. Is there another question? Oh, wow.
Sure.
We have two.
I'm tall. Okay. My name is Asha Gay Cole, and I'm actually the outgoing co-chair for the FLN, the Future Leaders Network, Jamaica representative. And I've also done work with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, so I have a bit of insight when it comes to Debt for Nature Search. I know Barbados did one, Bahamas done one, Jamaica has done one. So I have that insight. But how can debt for resilience swaps be structured to ensure transparency and accountability so that other young people can clearly see how is it that the savings are being used and trust for these resources, and how they're truly advancing long-term resilience and development priorities. So I may have insight, but I think just in terms of ensuring that regular persons, other youth, are being able to understand in full.
Well, you can see our youth in the Caribbean are far ahead of us. I'm tempted to ask Mr. Strawn. I'm sorry, but you need to answer this.
As a young person myself, no, communication is absolutely important as part of the process. And as just before I came here last week, we did a rebranding of a bus, coincidentally, as part of our Marine Spatial Plan work, which is the Debt for Nature swap. So having completed the Debt for Climate swap, we're doing a similar type of communication so that every Barbadian, especially young people, can understand the impact. So everybody likes to go to the sea, the beach, enjoy the beach, so therefore you need to understand what is required to maintain the marine environment. And to the extent that the Debt for Climate swap that we did, which is really to help augment our water resource management, Barbados being one of the world's 15 water scarce countries, it is important to appreciate that how we manage our water resources, the speed at which we grow, investment relies on a stable water environment. So we've been ramping up communications on that, such that the service delivery in these areas, obviously people can see, feel, and understand. And so to the extent that we are doing this third swap now, and I did mention the fact that we have 40% childhood obesity, which is very, very important for those young people to understand that the way that they live, if we don't do something early enough, then they could actually live a life that is not as productive as it ordinarily would be. And therefore, the change in diet, the school nutrition policy, all of these things that go into living a healthy life is going to be important, because in the Caribbean, we need to be able to pass the baton on to a young generation for them to run a fairly strong leg. But if you have these incidents, these high incidents of non-communicable diseases, then that is pretty much a significant impairment to the long-term growth of all of our economies. So communication, but then making sure that I think someone mentioned the framework for monitoring, public policy. As politicians, we say we're going to do these things. We have to show people where in the communities the impact of these things, how they actually go to enhance family life. And I think if we're able to demonstrate that very clearly, then it wouldn't be an issue of whether or not we're going to do it, because we've committed with our partners the monitoring mechanism that we will deliver. In this instance, it's really going to come down to how successful they are at convincing people as to why they need to change some of their habits in order to assure that ultimately the financial transaction will take place. But the real outcomes we want is really for every Barbadian to live a healthier lifestyle. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. She looks satisfied.
We'll talk after.
Exactly.
We'll talk after.
Thank you. Thank you. So I would like to open the floor to other questions from the audience. Is anybody else? At least one question. Yes, thank you.
Minister Strawn, good to see you here, and I was actually going to answer the young lady's question, but you did it so well. No, but I would just say that obviously having the multi-development banks back the debt swaps, whether it be debt for nature in the first instance or debt for climate, also shows the confidence in the sustainability of the debt trajectory and the work that you guys have done through the two IMF programs and through the BIRD programs to put the debt on that downward trajectory, and gives the banks obviously taking AAA plus or AAA rating or AA plus rating, allows the banks in Barbados specifically to deploy that liquidity to allow the government to achieve these sustainability goals, whether in water or in health, as you just mentioned. So very happy to see the World Bank and CAF as well get involved and contribute, and IDB and the CDB as well for getting involved in this new debt for social swap, which of course we are sharpening our pencils and evaluating at the moment. So just want to say congratulations for pioneering that and looking forward to the outcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Yes,
just let me respond to that, because when you said you need to have multiple tools pretty much in your toolkit. So this is our third swap. And I think the point you were making about the assessment about not being in distress. So we've had we had COVID, we had all kinds of things to respond to. But these are things that we have committed as part of the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program. And so as we've had fairly significant growth over the last few years, that has helped us to bring the debt trajectory down. And therefore these swaps have been used to be able to advance work that we really could not get on budget at the moment. And therefore it is important that even as the young people understand and appreciate that we are committing resources that would ordinarily just go to debt service, and therefore working in partnership like this allows us then to utilize those same resources to get other programming done urgently, which then complements the existing budgetary cycle. So it's important that they understand that the level of taxation, ultimately revenue mobilization, is important for sustaining the government's program, and therefore we've taken this particular path to be able to help augment the service delivery as quickly as we can. We keep saying we need to build resilience, but the only way that we can do that is if we achieve scale in order to try to, in effect, spend money twice, which we all know we can't do. But this framework allows us to do, or almost spend money twice.
We are sure that this framework will deliver. We are convinced, absolutely committed. So, any other question from the audience? Yes, please. Wow. I can accept two more, please.
Thank you, Stefano. Thanks to panelists for putting this panel together, high level. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
My question is probably addressed to World Bank and IDB, who have done this many times. Right now, I think we are in a unique situation where inflationary pressures pushing interest rates up. Maybe the outstanding debt is trading at discount, which make it easier to buy back. But what happens on the other economic environment when interest rates are going down and the outstanding rates are probably at premium? Will this formula also work when you have to retrieve debt that is actually more expensive? Thanks.
Jonathan.
Yeah, the first question is yes. No? It works both ways. We did it in 2021 in a different interest rate scenario. And part of the answer is because the way it's priced, it is based on multilateral development bank risk, which is basically linked to the U.S. Treasury yield curve, no, more than to the countries. What we observed during the last year is that even though the risk in countries has remained pretty stable, only due to the raising interest rate scenario globally, you can observe, at least for the Latin American and the Caribbean, an average 200 basis points of increasing costs. That's increasing cost of refinancing debt. No? So in this scenario, having the access, no, to capital in a more convenient way, it is helping a lot to countries, not only to do things with a swap and not increasing debt, but also to face refinancing risks in the portfolio in an efficient way, which is a part of the beauty of this type of ways of doing things. It's not only to reduce the overall burden, but to help the overall debt portfolio in terms of maturity, liquidity risk, refinancing risk, and provide a more comprehensive solution to debt management than the one that we were providing before, not just with loans.
Thank you. Lila, you want to add something?
I think that was quite a comprehensive answer.
Thank you. Thank you. So the last question. Thank you.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the Bahamas. On behalf of the citizens of the Caribbean, I want to echo strongly the sentiments of the gentleman here. I speak from the private sector. It is certainly a breath of fresh air to see the World Bank, the IDB, the other gentlemen, led by fellow Caribbean countries, bring these instruments to bear. And the world that we see here today, if we do this right, will not be the same tomorrow. So my question is, how long do you think it's going to take to bring this to a scalable model so we can roll this out and make the world a better place? Thank you.
Gabriel, you want to?
No, our objective is to do this as soon as possible. I mean, in our plan is this year's business, so for sure.
Jason?
I like that response. I think we're trying to do it as quickly as we can, taking into consideration the technicalities involved.
Well, this transaction by the end of the year need to be closed.
Yeah,
and
so-
Mr. can confirm.
Yes, by early December, I think.
Yes.
By early December.
November.
November. Yes, for our independence is the aim, but there's a lot involved. So it's not intended to. We're not trying to portray that this is easy, but we've gone through this process so that we can iron out any kinks, so that the institutions then will focus on what are those specific issues that each country may need to have resolved, so that shortens the time for getting the transactions executed. But I can say that working with all 4 MDBs so far, having gone through the first 2 with IDB and a couple other partners, European Investment Bank with the second one, the Nature Conservancy with the first one, we've been able to kind of have a relatively smooth path to execution. It's taken us roughly about 18 months from inception to close of each transaction, but I think that can be shortened once we finish this. We go away and then say to countries, this is the template, and we should be able to move from there.
Yeah, you're right. please. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, look, it takes two to tango. So, as you see, we're ready and we can engage.
It takes five to tango now.
Okay, 5 to tango. Yeah, in this case, it takes 5 to tango, exactly. Because you also need to have demand from the governments, and not only demand, but readiness to engage in these transactions. But because it's not just a simple operation, it also involves some serious commitments from the government side. And it depends on the policy content, because as you've seen, the policy content is different for different operations, depending on the most pressing needs of the country in terms of policy reforms. But they need to be ready to implement these policy reforms, and then also the commitment to use the savings for the pressing developmental issue, like in the case of Barbados, is the non-communicable diseases, but it can be others like I already mentioned earlier that the World Bank now is working with a group of OECS countries in the Eastern Caribbean to do a regional operation. And that one may actually focus, because we're still in discussions, but the idea for those transactions to focus on, or the development part to focus on building resilience, climate resilience, so which is a significant challenge. And as panelists were saying here, is better to invest in prevention than in the response. Of course, we need to have resources available and be prepared to invest in the response, but prevention is also very important.
Absolutely, yes, indeed. Thank you. So I would close with a round of takeaways.
I think there was one more question.
One more question? There's another question? It's the last concession, huh? You're lucky, eh?
Hi, my name is Antonio Navarro. I'm managing partner of ARCAP Strategies. We had the opportunity to work with some of the colleagues here in previous Debt for Nature swaps. We did El Salvador with CAF, and we worked before in Credit Suisse, where we had the opportunity to pioneer some of these structures. And I guess my question is, have any of the institutions here have considered incorporating, generating carbon credits as part of the money that is allocated for conservation? Because some of this work, or some of the funds that go into, the conservation efforts, especially in the Debt for Natures, can be directly translated into creating assets in the form of carbon credits. So with all of this new development on Article 6 compliance and the recent discussions around potential carbon credit buyers, I was wondering if there's been discussions internally at your institutions of incorporating this component to the transactions that you finance.
Maybe World Bank on this can answer.
Look, the carbon credit market is not a simple market, and these are very complex transactions. I think it will complicate the transaction significantly, but it's not an impossibility. And also, the country needs to be ready, because there is a very, very elaborate process of certification that the country needs to put in place, and this takes years and years to develop. So, but yeah, it's not like completely impossible, but you want to make sure that these transactions are done as, like in Barbados, we have a deadline, and then if it takes another 3 years to develop the carbon credit market, and in the country, and the certification and everything, and they need to have an asset for the carbon credits. Not everybody has it, like Guyana does, or Belize does with its huge blue economy around the country. Barbados may find it difficult because, where do you generate carbon savings, so to say?
Also that depends on the country, also, right? So that's not for everybody. So, but I think it's not excluded. So, thank you. So let's go to the takeaways from this panel, starting from Jason. One takeaway, if you can say one takeaway from this panel.
Yeah, I would say that one takeaway that I heard is that all of us, the traditional sovereign lending remains a part of the operation, but increasingly we're transitioning towards more innovative, capital-efficient mechanisms for lending, which I think would redound to the benefit of borrowing member countries.
Thank you. Lilia, one takeaway?
Yeah, I'm very excited about the partnership, and my phrase is working together to make sure that the sum is greater than the parts.
Thank you. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Joan?
Yeah, my takeaway would be to think about a changing culture, creating value together through partnerships, and make it happen the sooner the better.
Very good. Thank you. Daniel? Gabriel. Gabriel.
It's okay. My takeaway is for other countries that may be considering this type of transaction, that this instrument, well, was explained during the panel, allows you to transform debt into resilience without increasing debt burden. So it's just not a financial operation, but it's a strategic tool to strengthen resilience and long-term sustainability.
Thank you. Very, very wise. Mr. Strong.
So, Nelson Mandela would say that everything seems impossible until it is done. And all I can say to the audience here is that we've taken a posture that we will endeavor, that no matter what the challenges are, we will work with our partners to get it done, because our people are relying on us to get the policy interventions right. So let me thank the CDB, CAF, World Bank, and IDB for helping us to get it done. And you have the commitment of the government to ensure that what we agree, we shall deliver for the benefit of our country. So jump in, swim, float, do whatever you have to do, but get it done.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Joshua.
Yeah, I just go back to one of the points I made earlier, just about having sort of an expansive toolkit. This seems to play a role in that. The Caribbean is, a region of small, open economies that are exposed to a lot of external risks, and I think having a variety of tools to address the many challenges is going to put the countries in a better place here.
Perfect. Thank you. Before we conclude, I would like to sincerely thank you all for your thoughtful questions and active participation. The quality of the discussion today reflects the level of interest, engagement, and commitment that exists. And I think this is what we want to hear more, and we want to see more from our partners, and what we want to do more for our countries. No one will save us, it's been said, and I would say that this is the way we want to close this, and thanking all of you, and wishing you a great evening. Thank you.